Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us from different parts of the globe to day 5, which is the last day of the European Research Day 2022, Australia and New Zealand. It's a flagship event of Euraxess Australia and New Zealand, organized in collaboration with the Delegation of European Union to Australia and the Delegation of European Union to New Zealand. Today, we will be focusing on Australia-EU member state research cooperation and the role of scientific diaspora. Please join me in welcoming our honorable guests for today. We have with us Her Excellency Ms. Satu Mattila-Budich, who is the Ambassador of Finland to Australia. We also have with us His Excellency Mr. Tim Mawe, who is the Ambassador of Ireland to Australia. Similarly, we have with us His Excellency Mr. Paolo Crudel, Ambassador of Italy to Australia. We also have with us Her Excellency Ms. Alicia Moral Revilla, Ambassador of Spain to Australia. And the session on the first panel will be moderated by Dr. Fedia Jlovic, who is the Deputy Head of Delegation at the European Union to Australia. For the second panel of the day, we will have Professor Catherine Daniel from the Australian French Association for Research and Innovation, AFRAN. We'll also have Professor Alexander Meyer from Australia-Germany Research Network, AGRN. We will also be joined by Professor Marcelo Costa from Association of Italian Researchers in Australasia, ARIA. We will also have Dr. Angel Lopez Sanchez from Spanish Researchers in Australia Pacific, SRAP. And that session will be moderated by Ms. Rosie Keane, who is the Consul General at the Embassy of Ireland in Australia. Thank you to all our speakers for the availability. We are very eager to hear from all of you. And my name is Nishant Sandilia, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for Euraxess Australia and New Zealand. For those who have joined our event for the first time, Euraxess is an initiative of the European Commission that addresses barriers to the mobility of researchers and seeks to enhance scientific collaboration between Europe and the rest of the world. We provide free information about European research, career opportunities, international collaboration, and networking possibilities. Since all of you are watching this on your laptop or phone, I'll encourage you to type Euraxess Australia and New Zealand on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube and follow us there. You can as well tweet about this event with the handle #EID2022. Now, moving on to today's session, just to give you the running order, we will begin with a panel discussion on Australia-EU member state research cooperation, and this will be followed by another panel discussion on the role of scientific diaspora. I'd like to encourage all of you to please use the question function in the Zoom interface to ask any questions that you might have while our panelists are speaking. We'll come back to take your questions at the end of each intervention. Now, without further ado, please allow me to pass the platform to Dr. Fedia Jlovic, who is the Deputy Head of Delegation at the Delegation of European Union to Australia. Over to you, Fedia.
Nishan, thank you very much. And once again, welcome to all of you. And thank you for honorable guests to take the time on Friday, late afternoon for all of us, and hopefully also good mornings for our European colleagues. As we all agree that research is something that is not only very important, but connect regardless of which part of the world we find ourselves. So it only makes sense that EU, Australia, New Zealand, and each individual member states cooperate, and that we do together, because only in such a way we will achieve more. And we will probably all agree that we have quite a few challenges in the present and in the near future that hopefully science will provide some answers. In this respect, I would like to ask all of each individual ambassador to tell us in a few minutes what they are doing on the national levels, what is their embassy doing in research cooperation with Australia, and yes, and then from there on we will take and there are some more questions. Can we start with Her Excellency Ms. Satu Mattila-Budich, Ambassador of Finland, to explain us what Finnish embassy is doing here in Australia. Please.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Good evening from Canberra. And thank you for inviting us for this webinar. Well, between Finland and Australia, there is no agreement in the field of science and research, but there is, however, quite a lot of cooperation and mobility of researchers. Of the academic international joint publications in Finland, between 8 and 9% include cooperation with Australian counterparts. Half of the cooperation is in the field of medicine and health sciences, and the rest is social, natural, bioscience, bio and environmental science. The projects of the Academy of Finland are good indicators on mobility. The Academy of Finland is the key governmental funding body for science research in Finland. Mobility, of course, always implies also wider cooperation, and joint publications have deep roots. We can say that the flow of researchers is predominantly from Finland to Australia and much less vice versa. If we look at the period of past 5 years, there was a total of 36 cases where the Academy of Finland granted funding for mobility. We estimate that there might be some 100 joint publications per year, but it is a tedious task to map it all out, and there could be much more. These are just two indicative data points that I could get my hands on. There is surely more out there, and it's one task for the embassy and my team to dig in deeper and map out the Finland-Australia mobility of researchers and scientists in more detail. This is an ongoing process, and hopefully next year we'll have a better picture about the situation. Considering the distance between our countries, we can say that the cooperation is, however, fairly active. One thing that certainly stands out is that there is room for more cooperation. Possibly we could strive to review some of dormant discussions on a couple of cooperation agreements between Finland and Australia. I would like to highlight that it would be great to see Australia join the Horizon Europe as a full partner. Australia has participated in several European research projects together with the Finns, and there could be many more opportunities. In general, we see that international cooperation in research and innovation is the key for high-quality research for all of us. So we are very interested in strengthening ties between our universities and research institutes in Australian institutions. And we also, of course, welcome Australian students and PhD students to consider Finland as a study and work destination. I think I will finish here, and I give the floor to Petja. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Very interesting, and of course, as you know, you stole my finishing lines. That I really hope that Australia will definitely join as associate country Horizon Europe, because this will definitely open many doors and enhance already existing ties in research. And we, as a delegation, with all member states, we are passing this message constantly to our Australian interlocutors, and we hope, as optimists, that we will see the change of heart. On that optimistic note, could I ask His Excellency Mr. Tim Mawe, to Ambassador of Ireland, to say some words about the Irish cooperation in research with Australia. Tim?
Sure. Thanks very much, Petja, and thanks, Nishant. It's great to be part of this festival of connectivity between Australia and Europe. And you'll hear from our Consul General in Sydney in a little bit because she's moderating part 2. But since she and I arrived in Australia about a year ago, we've been trying to boost engagement between Ireland and Australia in relation to research and education. If I look back a long way, Ireland has always seen itself as a centre of learning, and in some ways keeping the flame of learning alive, including during the so-called Dark Ages. Indeed, there's a famous judgment on intellectual property rights that was handed down in the year 561 AD I'm not sure of the month, that still operates as a guiding principle today. And at that time, there was a monk, Christian monk, Columkill, who had surreptitiously copied a manuscript belonging to another monk, Finian of Mawe. And Finian, of course, appealed to the king. And the High King found against Columkill and gave his judgment with the line, "To every cow its calf, and to every book its copy." And the technology may have changed in the meantime, and the subject matter may have changed, but 1,400 years later, that line still rings true and shows, I think, Ireland's long connection to knowledge and to learning. But we live in the now, and the approach of Ireland today, when it comes to mobility, was summed up to me by a colleague a few years back who said, "Labour is mobile, but talent is dynamic." And for Ireland and Australia to prosper in the 21st century, I think it's important that we both make use of all the talent available, regardless of where it is. And that's why Ireland seeks to engage worldwide with good and interesting researchers, and we have a number of supports in place to do so. I don't think I'll try and flood you with facts on a Friday evening, but in the words of Adam Bant, the Green leader here, in response to a similar kind of question, he said, "Google it, mate." But in reality, there are a lot of supports available for research through our universities, through our National Science Foundation Ireland, and the Irish Research Council. One of the issues we'll turn to later maybe is how simple and how complex these things are, and we can go back to that point at that time. But from an Irish perspective, I'd maybe point to two things. One is our recognition, and the other is our reputation. And in terms of recognition, there is what I would call external recognition, where Ireland is ranked 14th in the global scientific ranking, scoring particularly highly in relation to immunology, where we are second, agricultural sciences and neuroscience and behaviour, where we're third, and material sciences, where we're sixth in the world. We also rank first in the world for knowledge diffusion, which maybe goes back to Columkill and all his mates. But maybe just importantly, from a societal perspective, there is internal recognition of the value of research in Ireland, where 94% of people feel science is important. And 85% of people think that scientists have a responsibility to share their knowledge with the public. So any researcher working with Ireland is working in a good environment. I think in terms of reputation, we're widely perceived as being a small, friendly, welcoming country. We're about the same size as Tasmania, but about 10 times the population. We're located in Europe. We have a coordinated university sector, and we have high educational standards. And we're also the European home for major companies such as Google, Abbott, Takeda, and many, many more. And I think this is maybe an important point, that in Ireland, there's a good relationship between the research community, the government, and the private sector, with a pretty good symbiosis between research skills and topics and the direction of business. In hard cash, we've invested about $2 billion in research facilities over the last 2 decades, and we have some really world-class kit and facilities available. So all in all, I think we have a good story to tell about how Ireland is an attractive place for Australia to collaborate and cooperate with. I have heard it said in the past while that Australia is really good at basic research, but doesn't always capitalise it. Ireland is almost the opposite, where we have a strong track record in applying research to addressing problems. And I think on a bad day, Australia and Ireland could end up talking past each other. But I think on a good day, there are huge potentials for complementing each other. And between the embassy and the consulate, we endeavour to have more good days than bad days. And you may address this later, but the strong relationship between Ireland and Australia, where about 10% of people in Australia have Irish heritage, means that the engagement between us is pretty easy. We kind of understand each other. And we're not starting from zero. Already 15 Australian universities and 14 Irish institutions have agreements in relation to research, some of them multiple agreements, or international collaborations to our science agency, Science Foundation Ireland, has Australia as the 11th most popular partner for us. But of course we can do more. And this is where, whether it is Canberra and Sydney, I hope we can bring some energy to the relationship, both here in Australia and also in Ireland, because for research cooperation to bloom, I think we need to have engagement at both ends of the equation. I'll come join the general conversation later, but for now I might leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tim. Very, optimistic description. And yes, I do agree strongly that in the future we are looking for more good days, and that's why we are here, and that's why research days are definitely helping to bring people from both sides of the world and to bring light to some of the less known facts sometimes. But as Ambassador Byzantine mentioned in his opening remarks, we are living in very quickly changing world, and which is actually pushing us that we work closer and closer together. So I'm definitely optimistic that, like, in a few years' time, when we will have another round table like this, that we will, be, with smiles saying about all the achievements. On that happy note, I would like to invite His Excellency Paolo Crudele, Ambassador of Italy to Australia, to tell us more. And I can say that I participated in some of the events of the Italian embassy, which was actually based on the research in innovativity. So I'm sure that the Ambassador will say quite a positive picture. Ambassador, please.
Thank you very much for this introduction, and thanks for having me. I want to acknowledge your efforts to put together this important audience, and of course, from my side, I appreciate very much initiatives from the EU delegation. Let me start mentioning the Treaty on Scientific Matters. It's an international treaty that Italy has with Australia since last year. So that's quite an outcome, and it represents in a way the outcome, the final goal of a very long-standing relationship between Italy and Australia. As many of you possibly know, in the last 150 years, an important number of Italians have reached this wonderful country, and nowadays we count around over 1 million people of Italian descendants, which is a number quite significant. And thanks to this relevant community, Italy and Australia managed to build a very strong connection in terms of policy, in terms of economy, but also in terms of science. As this treaty that we signed last year can confirm, can witness. As a matter of fact, research cooperation is one of the strategic assets of the relationship between our countries. And in recent years, Italy was Australia's 8th highest publications partner, with an average of almost 2,000 joint publications per year, while Australia was Italy's 11th highest collaborator. So it's a dense and important, significant cooperation. In several scientific fields, the cooperation is particularly intense, but let me mention one of them, the space sector. In the space sector, there's a protocol between the two space agencies, and the cooperation is really improving in the last years. I had the chance to be in Adelaide a few days ago to the Space Forum, and that's been the proof of how intense this cooperation is going on. There was a presence of 10 Italian companies in Adelaide, and this is quite significant. Let me also underline that several thousand of Italian scientists, PhD students, postdocs, full professors are present in Australia. And there's also an association, but possibly in the latest remarks from one of the professors participating to this event, that will be underlined as an association of Italian researchers in Australia. And there's also an important presence of the Australian institutions in Italy. The Monash University has a campus in Prato, and is developing very interesting projects on our territory. So I encourage Australian students to touch base with Monash University, because that can be a vehicle, a way of approaching Italy and maybe planning some future, some cooperation in research with our country. And on that note, let me remind that Italy has more than 90 universities, and 2/3 of them are public. Some of them they give opportunities to about 9,000 students each year for PhDs. And some of them are very high profile in terms of scientific fields. So let me remember the Politecnico in Milan, the University of Turin, but also Palermo in Sicily, which is a very important asset that we have in astrophysics. The research system is complemented by 12 public research organizations that support university-based PhD programs and offer numerous opportunities at postdoc level. So chances are there, ways to more people-to-people exchanges are there, and these are all significant numbers that I tried to list here to encourage more exchanges and more possibilities, opportunities of working together. Let me underline that human capital exchanges are essential to also make these all processes successful. And our embassy, with the activity of our scientific attaché, is here with me, and I want to thank Mr. Marco Lazzarino. Our embassy is committed to enhance this bilateral cooperation, and for any kind of information or contact, please, you're much welcome to call, to write, and we will try to develop any hypotheses or possibilities of working together. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ambassador Crudele. Of course, there will be a question about some concrete activities of the embassies. But before we come to that, Ambassador of Spain, Her Excellency Alicia Moral Revilla, please, the floor is yours. And I'm sure that Spain, as a historical center of learning, has a lot to offer in the field of research. Please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Feja. Thank you, Nishant, for inviting me one more year to participate in Europe Research Days. It's an honor to participate in this event. First of all, I would like to say to start, before telling you about what Spain, how Spain collaborates with Australia in science and research, that for Spain, international cooperation on science, research and innovation is a priority. And not only as a member of the European Union, where we know that international cooperation of science is a strategic priority with the European Union strategy on international cooperation on science, and also with the Horizon Europe program, but also bilaterally. The Ministry of Science and Innovation in Spain puts a lot of effort and funds to promote mobility, international engagement, and encourages the participation of Spanish researchers in international institutions, in research infrastructures, and of course encourages the participation of Spanish scientists, Spanish institutions in European programs, and in international and promotes international cooperation with other countries. And the second remark I want to make is that Spain is very much aware of the potential of collaboration on science and research with Australia and with Australian universities. And in this respect, Spain has increased enormously its collaboration with Australia since 2014, when the Association of Spanish Researchers for Australia and the Pacific was created. This association, well, we have the president of this association, the SRAP, with us today, and he's one of the panelists for the second panel. He will explain to you a little bit better what is this organization, or what is the objectives of this organization. I just want to say that its main mission is to promote and to encourage collaboration between Australian researchers, research institutions and scientists with Spanish research institutions and scientists, and also assists Australian researchers to participate in Spanish research systems and vice versa. The SRAP organizes many events throughout the year. I want just to underline the annual forums that organizes every year. The annual forum of 2022 is going to take place at the end of this month on the 25th of November. And the topic this year will be a digital world. I want also to mention the recent conference organized by the SRAP on the 30th of May between Spanish and Australian universities with the title of Building Bridges between the Australian and Spanish university system. I think Angel will tell you more about these initiatives. Another initiative or instrument of cooperation between Spain and Australia is the Malespina Award. Well, in fact, is a way of giving visibility to this collaboration between Australia and Spain. This award is bestowed by the Spanish Embassy in collaboration with the SRAP to individuals or entities that have made a significant contribution to the scientific or cultural relationship between Australia and Spain. And I want to say that this year, the 2022 Malespina Award has been bestowed to RMIT Europe, and the ceremony will take place next week on the 18th of November in the Academy of Science in the Shine Dome in Canberra. And I want to take the opportunity to thank Nishan because he will be participating in this ceremony. RMIT Europe is a real center for Australian European academic and research cooperation. It has participated in 31 research projects in Europe, and in 27 of them involving Spanish organizations, Spanish scientists. I want to say that, I mean, this award, it has been bestowed to MIT also because it is a real model of how Australian universities can participate in research and innovation in Europe. I want to mention also the Loyola University, a Spanish university that received also a Malespina Award in 2019 because, well, this university has close research ties with Australian universities and has partnerships with 5 research centers in the University of Sydney, in the Australian National University, and has a very important mobility program with the University of Sydney and the University of Canberra. Currently, the University of Loyola has 3 adjunct professors working in the University of Canberra. Other initiatives that I can mention of this collaboration between Spain and Australia is, well, again, the SRAP facilitates contacts between scientific community and institutions in Spain, in Spain, and businesses, Spanish businesses. The organization of events, not only by the SRAP, but also by the Spanish Embassy, that we consider important for creating networks, more visibility of this collaboration, and can give and can promote new collaboration projects. Science Spain is a member of the Science Diplomatic Club in Canberra since 2019. Our education office in the Embassy of Spain has also some programs to facilitate mobility of teachers. Recently, we have signed an agreement with the Department of Education of New South Wales to bring Spanish teachers, especially in STEM, to Australian schools and universities. Promotion of Spanish language is another important activity we do in the embassy, and also with the Instituto Cervantes in Sydney. And this is important because, I mean, promoting the Spanish language in Australia also helps to encourage this collaboration in research, science, and innovation. Well, I already talked about this collaboration between universities, researchers, and Spanish companies. And I can mention some examples, like, for example, a big Spanish company based here in Australia, Ferrovial, that collaborates with Macquarie University in a project on big data, on Avantia, a shipbuilder company, a Spanish shipbuilder company that collaborates with UTS. I think I will stop here, and maybe in the discussion we can add a few more remarks about this collaboration or possibilities for future collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Very interesting, and of course, a list of cooperation is very long. Now we will go to the first question to ambassadors. Now we talked about the research opportunities and existing ties between the member states and Australia, but of course now I would like to touch the theme. And how do you see the role of your embassy in promoting cooperation between the EU, your country, and Australia? And because we received already one question, especially in this post-pandemic world that has changed the way we used to do some of the things. Please, and I think we can start again with Ambassador Mattila-Budich. Ambassador Satu? Okay, I see that she's not at the camera. Then we can maybe continue with Irish ambassador. Team, if you could step in.
Yeah, for sure. Feja, thanks very much, and all very interesting contributions to date. As people were talking, I was kind of thinking about that kind of stuff. What can we do and what should we be doing? Kind of came at a scientific angle to it, which is, I think, ourselves in the embassy and also the consulates, we're almost like catalysts. We promote a reaction, but we don't necessarily take part in the reaction. I think in this case, we are trying to engender some opportunities out there where there can be a collaboration between Australian institutions and researchers and European, in our case, Irish institutions and researchers. But we can't do the work of the education institutions or the research institutions, but we can try and bring people together and try and encourage people to come together. And also look out for opportunities that might emerge at the Australian end and say back to people on the European end, here's something to go for. And it's about that kind of curiosity, and it operates, I suppose, in spades in a post-COVID environment where things are different. I mean, on the upside, and you're saying my earlier input was very optimistic. This is more optimistic, more optimism, which is, it is incredible the rapidity with which the research community worldwide was able to develop a vaccine for COVID so fast. And that involved a lot of collaboration. And I recall in the early days, there was a lot of valuable work done in Australia that fed into research elsewhere. I suppose the second positive, if there is such a thing as a positive coming out of COVID, is that, and this is an example, this video conference is an example, the amount of technical and technological workarounds that people came up with when they couldn't travel can continue and facilitate ongoing collaboration as we go forward. If there's a caveat or a kind of a slight warning, is that the geopolitical changes in and around COVID could lead to countries receding or retreating into blocks where they'll cooperate with their friends but won't cooperate worldwide. You'd hope that knowledge and research can be independent of politics, and that's what's at bottom is science that we want to pursue. Let's see how that goes. But overall, I think for all the embassies, many of the embassies in Australia, European embassies in Australia, they're not large. They don't have huge people to be doing all sorts of wonderful things. But I think all of the embassies, those here this evening and also those not here, they're committed to promoting a high level engagement between Australia and Europe. And we'll use whatever channels they can to do that. For our part, we'll be rattling the tree a little bit and seeing what we can do between Australian institutions and Irish institutions, and recognising at that time that some of the pressure has to come on the Irish side as well as on the Australian side to show a bit of interest, see the opportunities and pursue them. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. I definitely agree that embassies and the delegation is the bridge between the EU on the other side of the world and Australia. And we can do as much of connecting, but of course that interest and that reaction on both sides have to be. But I'm not going to repeat it again. I'm optimistic, but I strongly believe that interest is there, and we can see it on daily basis, and we can see that people that joined today this session, there's a lot of interest, and there are a lot of opportunities. I will go now back to Her Excellency Mattila-Budich. The question is about the concrete role that your embassy is playing in promoting cooperation between the EU, your country, and Australia.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was kicked out from the meeting, but now I'm back. Well, I think our role is very practical. We facilitate connections and look for contact details and try to map out a bigger picture. We also make sure that in our bilateral discussions, science and research cooperation is addressed whenever possible, appropriate. EU member state embassies in Australia together are naturally a bigger entity and have a more power to highlight the existing cooperation and increase the image of Europe as an attractive partner for research and science cooperation. In general, our role as the embassy is to promote the awareness of Finland as a country of knowledge and innovation. We are often known of the education system, but sometimes less so on the excellent higher education, research and innovation ecosystem. I could just mention that in Finland, we are making increasing investment in research and innovation with an aim to reach 4% of GDP into R&D by 2030. And of course, as in many embassies, our resources are quite limited, and we don't have a science counselor or anything like that, but we try to do whatever we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ambassador Crudele, would you be able to say a few words about the activities and efforts of the Italian embassy?
Very briefly, thank you, Feja. Well, on the basis of the treaty that I mentioned before, of course, we try to carry out activities meant mainly focused to facilitate exchanges people to people. So we try to encourage Australian researchers to participate to European projects coordinated by Italy and vice versa. That is the main focus that we have here at the embassy and the consular network, of course. Let me just mention a second target that we have as institutions. It's also the need to communicate better our assets. Of course, I don't have to mention which sectors Italy is more famous and well known all over the world. But what we try to do is also communicating which sectors are so strongly developed in Italy and maybe is less known. I mentioned before space sector, but for instance, there's a strong priority in our economy towards renewable energies, all the infrastructure that accompanies the ecological transition. There are companies very well developed in the sectors which are not simply fashion and food, just to name some traditional ones. So our scientific attaché has a lot of work to do in terms of facilitating contacts. Also, let's remember that Australia is a federal state, so it's very important to touch base with the different states and try to connect with them and their universities. That is the job we are also trying to develop here at the embassy, but at the same time, we have also a more general task in terms of communication. Thank you.
Sorry, I muted myself. Thank you, Ambassador Crudele. And now back to Her Excellency Moral Revilla. to explain a bit about the activities of Spanish embassy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Feja. Well, we don't have a scientific attaché, but science cooperation or science diplomacy is also a priority, is part of the mission of the embassy. And our channel for this collaboration is the SRAP, as I said in my presentation, the Association of Spanish Researchers in Australia. And the Spanish embassy supports all the activities of the SRAP, including financing the association. This is part of what we do, but I think that all the activities the embassy is doing to promote the Spain in Australia, as I said in my presentation, promoting the Spanish language in Australia, cultural activities, everything that makes Spain better known in Australia and makes Australian or create an interest in Australia to visit Spain, to invest in Spain, to collaborate, in this case, with Spanish scientists, Spanish institutions, Spanish universities. I think it's important in an embassy. We have also 2 consulate generals in Sydney and Melbourne that, of course, support and help Spanish researchers that are based in Australia. And also we have an important number of Spanish companies, big companies in Australia, and some of them are supporting and encouraging this collaboration with Spanish researchers, Spanish scientists here in Australia. So really for the Embassy of Spain, scientific cooperation is also a priority. And we dedicate, even if we don't have a scientific attaché, but we dedicate part of our time to promote scientific cooperation and a better engagement between Australian universities, Australian researchers, and Spanish universities and Spanish researchers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, I have to say here that EU delegation has a scientific counselor, and of course we assist our member states in this respect. Of course, we also have a colleague working in the education field. So, of course, as the EU is just, all the member states together, or just it's the sum, we assist and work together to promote all member states, because one of the questions was exactly this, that of course there is a lot of individual agreements or research projects between universities or member states and Australia, but Australia closer to Asia, tends to have more outreach in the research field with countries closer to it. That there is something missing on the EU level, and of course here I will immediately say yes, we have invited Australia for the Horizon Europe, where a lot of financial resources are dedicated for the research. We would, as in the past, we would welcome Australia and Australian researchers and Australian universities to join, because as it was mentioned by Tim, that only together we will be able to complement, to find not only the vaccine for COVID, but many more other vaccines or scientific or technological answers to modern problems. And whenever we talk about medicine, I remember that 100 years ago, or even not like so long ago, people were massively dying of some diseases, and now it's just a pill, and you can have a meaningful, full life, and you can just say thank you for the research and cooperation, because nothing can be done individually nowadays. On that note, let's have the last question from my side. And this is, of course, we are not only optimists, but we are also realists. So we always have to see, what is already done, what is existing, but what could be done more to strengthen cooperation and collaboration in science, research, and innovation. What is working well, what is missing, and where are the challenges? Please, and we will start again with Excellencies Mattila-Budich for her, I think, final thoughts, because we are slowly running out of time. Please, Vesper.
Yes, thank you, Fedja. Well, I think maybe funding opportunities could probably be advertised more and also could make more visible. And also, of course, existing success stories should be highlighted and celebrated. On a very practical level, I think this discussion and the background study we did at the embassy has inspired me to try to pull together the Finnish scientists active in Australia. It would be potentially very fruitful to have that network established and to be able to harness their views as well. In general, I think we need more networks and links between our institutions and individual researchers, and more concrete projects, and maybe even joint funding mechanisms. And of course, if Australia could join the Horizon Europe, we think many of the challenges with research funding would be easier to solve. And perhaps especially after the pandemic, we could encourage also more mobility between students and staff between Australia and Europe, as personal ties often are best starting points for future cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Team, before I let you speak, there was a question about, of course, a wish that Irish language would be spoken as widely and as fluently as other languages. There was a comment, obviously, of an Irish compatriot or somebody with Irish descent. But please think about the challenges and opportunities and what the future should bring.
No, I can only agree with Vesper Campion, who is not a pseudonym of mine. Of course, we'd like to see Irish spoken more fluently across Australia and in Ireland as well. There are quite a number of supports from the government to support organisations or groups who wish to hold classes and so forth in the Irish language, and they're kind of easily accessible. And again, if there's something particular in mind, if you contact either myself in the embassy or Rosie in the Consulate General in Sydney, we'll do what we can to help. There are nice green shoots popping up all around the country here of people interested in Irish culture and Irish language and Irish dancing and Irish sport, which is kind of encouraging. But in terms of the core subject matter of research, maybe the key thing to get right is maybe a little bit of clarity as to what it is we want, or who talks to who. We have in this country, as Paula mentioned, you have sort of federal arrangements, Commonwealth arrangements, and also each individual state. Beneath that, you have each individual university or education institution. And that's multiplied by, let's say, 8 or 9 in this country. You go on the other side, on the European side, you have 27 member states, some of which are federal operations as well, and then the European institutions, and then the individual universities and so forth. So there's a lot of players in the field. And I think sometimes we can get caught at cross purposes where the wrong level talks the wrong level. So if there's one thing to develop in the next period is maybe a little bit of clarity as to at what level are we engaging. To a certain extent, the organic engagement that is there already between individuals or universities or collections of universities is probably working quite well, and sometimes doesn't need input from embassies and so forth to try and make it better. It is working fine on its own. If there's maybe a quality that I would sort of encourage people to have, I suppose, it's that of curiosity. Researchers are curious people by nature, and I would hope that their curiosity would extend beyond their subject matter and extend into, I wonder who else is doing this kind of stuff, who else can I work with, including people in Europe, people in Ireland, and not just confine themselves to maybe the region, or in many cases, the United States. And going with that, I suppose, given the complexity of the sector and given the breadth of what is possible, I think a fair degree of stamina is needed. I don't think there's a quick fix in this. I don't think a treaty or an MOU or even joining Horizon is going to transform things overnight. But I think a bit of stamina, understanding where we're starting from, understanding where we want to get to, and working our way through it like a proper research project, I think will deliver a lot of benefits for everybody. Thanks.
No, I think this is a realistic view, and I know that, we are not 100-meter runners, we are marathon runners, but with that clear picture in our mind that we want to deepen our research cooperation, all our activities will be a small step to this goal over a long time. So probably we will all finish our mandates here, and the work will be still being done on our side, but also on the Australian side. And yeah, it's how to say, a palace is not being built overnight, but each day we have to contribute a small bit to the fine and noble goal. On that, Ambassador, what are your goals to achieve and more, and how hence our service?
Well, I don't want to repeat myself. I just add something to what I commented before. Of course, we very much focus on mobility, and I think that it's the key. Without mobility between the two cote of Australia and Italy researchers, you don't develop any projects together. And of course, that is also in coordination with you and the delegation, European delegation, and the European Union. One thing that we're trying to promote a bit more is is fostering the cooperation between the startups in technological fields. I visited Lu14 in Adelaide, Cicada in New South Wales in Sydney. There's a strong base for startups cooperation, and there is a process which is quite difficult because most of the times these are companies which are quite small or medium small, so that is somewhere the embassies and the consulates can play a role to accompany the process. So we are very much interested in developing also this kind of bilateral cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Something that was already mentioned today, I would really like to underline it. Of course, it's curiosity, but it's of course also speaking each other languages. And for that, as Alicia mentioned, but also EU is supporting very strongly, learning of European languages, and we have quite a few rewards giving to high schools and universities for that. And of course, I have to say proudly that I'm listening to SBS every morning, actually for Italian language, and I find it kind of fascinating, that you have this opportunity here in Australia, not only to hear either your own language or another European language and other languages, but also to hear the news from the other side, but also from Australia. So speak as many languages as possible. That's always great. And of course, European languages are very beautiful. On that happy note, I will reach out to Alicia for her closing remarks. Then we are actually running out of time.
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, just one last comment or suggestion. Maybe we should have we should promote better cooperation or coordination between European Union embassies in Australia, to encourage more participation of Australia in European programs, more participation of Australian universities in European programs. And I think that Australia should better acknowledge the importance of greater collaboration with Horizon Europe. And maybe we should also join forces to organize more events, more joint events, conferences, roundtables that would give more visibility to the collaboration, scientific collaboration of European Union countries with Australia, that would encourage networking, that would encourage partnerships, better engagement. Well, I don't know. I don't know if this would be easy to carry out, but I think we should try to coordinate a little bit better among ourselves. We have our bilateral programs, but I think that if we join forces, that would not only encourage Australia to participate in European programs, but also it will encourage Australia to participate, to collaborate bilaterally with the different European Union countries in Australia.
You have just given me additional tasks for the next week, because definitely I will talk with ambassador and with scientific counselor about this, and we will try to organize, of course, the meeting of member states about this, and to see how can we do exactly as you mentioned, Alicia. Because you always need two to tango, so we have to do work on our side here in Canberra among member states. Of course, we have to ensure that all our capitals do all their work, and then forcefully reach out to Australia on all different levels to ensure that the scientific research will be only deepening and being enhanced in the near future. So thank you for this great idea. I will work on it. That's my promise. Well, actually, we have literally reached our allocated time. So thank you very much to your excellencies. Thank you very much for everybody who has joined. Thank you also for people who have posted some questions. I hope that we replied at least to some of them. Of course, I assume I can say in all our names that if there are some more questions, some are interested, we're all open to be contacted. And of course, our work does not end with the end of this panel, but as I said, will continue already next week when we'll try to establish this scientific working group, or at least a meeting among member states. Nishant, on that side, the word is back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Fedia, and thank you to all His Excellency and Her Excellencies for taking out time from your schedule. I think this is what we wanted to have at the end of this session, that we start moving towards a direction that we are desiring. I take note of some of the lessons that we need to learn from all the ambassadors, so that we will also try to move Euraxess efforts in that direction. I really hope when Fedia mentioned that next week he's going to work on this, there will be positive things that will come out, and maybe next year we will organize something as a physical, more larger event where we can all come together, brainstorm, and come up with concrete results as to what the questions have been coming out in terms of united European ecosystem. So thank you very much for all your time. We very much appreciate you taking your time on a Friday evening and coming and speaking to our audience. With that, I think we will swiftly move on to our next panel, which is very interesting as well, role of scientific diaspora. And I'd like to introduce our moderator for the particular panel, Ms. Rosie Keane, who is the Consul General for Embassy of Ireland in Australia. Rosie, I'll pass over the panel to you for you to run as you desire. Sorry, we cannot hear you, Rosie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry, it wouldn't be a Zoom call without some technical issues. But thank you very much, Nishan, for the very warm welcome. And I'm delighted to be here with you, Stephen. I'm very honoured indeed to have been asked to moderate this session. So good evening to everyone here, and welcome to the last session of European Research Days 2022 on the role of the scientific diaspora. Just before I begin, I want to acknowledge the land from which I'm speaking from this evening, which is Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So as Consul General of Ireland, I know only too well the enormous value that an active and engaged diaspora can contribute. With an all-island population in Ireland of about 7 million, our diaspora is about 10 times that amount. Indeed, it's often said in Ireland that our diaspora is one of our greatest resources, and throughout the decades, in often the most challenging of times, we've seen time and again the enormous value that these networks can bring to bear politically, economically, and even socially. But I'm sure, you know, that you cannot fail to notice these days the many global challenges that we face. No country was left untouched by the pandemic, just as no country has managed to avoid the impact of climate change, of geopolitical tensions, or challenges to democratic values and the international rules-based order. Global challenges like these require a global response, one which encompasses the broadest range of experiences and knowledge, so that the solutions we come up with deliver the best, most innovative and inclusive response for our societies. Indeed, to quote from the EU strategy on research and innovation, excellent research needs the best minds from all over the world to work together. And I think that phrase in and of itself really underscores succinctly the need for, and indeed the importance of, a scientific diaspora. We need to harness their global experience and knowledge to best tackle today's global challenges. But I think to tease this out on a more granular level, I'm delighted tonight that we are joined indeed by some of these great minds on our panels. We have Professor Catherine Danielle from the Australian-French Association for Research and Innovation. We have Professor Alexander Meyer from the Australian-German Research Network. We have Professor Marcelo Costa from the Association of Italian Researchers in Australia. And we have Dr. Angel Lopez Sanchez from the Spanish researchers in the Australia Pacific. So I'd like to begin this session by inviting each one of our panelists to deliver their remarks on their cooperation activities, including what they have in the pipeline. And then following these statements, then we'll have a Q&A session where we'll also invite the audience to submit questions to the panelists. So I'd like to begin first by inviting Professor Catherine Danielle to begin our session.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rosie, and thanks also to the EU delegation for the invitation to present a bit of what AFRAN's been up to today. I would also like to acknowledge the country that I'm coming from this evening, Ngunnawal Ngambri country, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and also extend that respect and acknowledgement to all other First Nations people. Now, and I think this is particularly important when we're thinking about cross-cultural dialogue and learning about multiple knowledge systems and how they interact. And it's certainly something that AFRAN takes very seriously in the way that we organise our events. So the Australian-French Association for Research and Innovation was launched in 2016, and it was a merger of other French and Australian science and researcher networks. So it included the French Researchers in Australia Network and the Australian-French Association for Science and Technology. And little by little, we've added other groups around the country. We recently merged with another AFAS body in 2021 to become one major binational science research innovation network to support cooperation in research and innovation between our two countries, and in fact in sort of Francophone world and across the Pacific and Indian Oceans as well. AFRAN attempts to support the cooperation in a range of ways, including information sharing, community and platform formation across different parts of Australia and across different thematic scientific areas. We fund a range of initiatives to try to upscale cooperation and to fill in some of the areas that aren't necessarily covered by existing funding mechanisms. And the idea of the association is to not just focus on researchers, but other innovators, policymakers and cultural partners who are also interested in supporting dialogue around science, knowledge, and how we can deal with some of the global challenges that the ambassadors talked about in the first session. In terms of what we've been up to this year, 2022 has been a really important year for re-engaging in person. We've also continued some hybrid and virtual format events, being able to bring the advantages of the lessons of the last few years into our current practice. In 2021, we launched a France hub. AFRAN has been launching hubs around Australia and the Pacific. And 2021 was the time that we launched a hub in France. This was really important for us because it's meant that we've been able to, as well as working with the French embassy, who are our main partner and financer, we've been able to work more closely with the Australian embassy in Paris and to start to run events and to work with more Australian researchers in France and French researchers in France who work with Australians. And so that's been a really beneficial part of the cooperation this year. We've also run many different symposiums, particularly around public health. We had a great Women in Science event at the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney, a range of Bastille Day events. We've been including also more youth perspectives. So we've developed recently an alumni community of many students, university students who have previously undertaken exchanges in institutions in France or in Australia and incorporated those into AFRAN. And so some of our alumni leaders have been running different events, including one on youth perspectives in Tahiti this year for our Pacific hub. We've also been working around French-Australian cooperation in Antarctica with a great event in both Tasmania and then in Paris, linked to the French embassy. We've had exhibitions as well on climate change and biodiversity. And with the support of the embassy, we've been able to run events like the Night of Ideas, which is a global phenomenon now, that was run this week in Canberra. In terms of what's next, we're going through quite a lot of work on our next 5-year strategy planning, including through working with our partner organisations like the Alliance Française to think about what kind of events we may be able to run around Australia and further in our networks. We've also started a range of what's called réseau plus apéro, so networking and aperitifs, which have been held in French Polynesia and a range of other places. And then, like I know some of the other groups, we also run an annual forum, and the forum this year will be hosted by the Swinburne University of Technology. It's on the theme of Innovative Planet, and it will take place on the 7th and 8th of December. And of course, everyone, like with many of these other forums, is welcome to attend. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Professor Danielle. Now I'd like to call on Professor Mawe.
Thank you very much, Rosie. And thank you very much, everyone. And I'm very pleased here to represent the Australia-Germany Research Network. Before I start, my apologies, because I suffer from COVID at the moment and my grip on reality is a little bit foggy at the moment. So please bear with me. So the Australia-Germany Research Network, or AGRN, is a joint initiative by the Australian Embassy in Berlin and the German Embassy in Canberra. It was officially launched in November 2018 in Berlin. And it was modeled on the very successful network Catherine just introduced to us. So the AGRN provides a bilateral platform for networking and information exchange for all Australian and German researchers for the students, for entrepreneurs, companies, funding agencies, and all other stakeholders with an interest in a bilateral research and development. The central hub is actually a LinkedIn group, and this group has currently over 1,700 members from Australia and Germany. All members can post current information about research projects, funding opportunities, bilateral events, job offers, and of course, use the platform to identify new research and industry partners, or just share good news stories. The AGRN newsletter is published approximately every 3 months and provides information about conferences, events, funding, and policy developments in research and innovation. It also showcases successful Australian-German research collaborations and profiles Australian researchers in Germany and vice versa. The events under the AGRN branding are organized in both countries, funded by respective hosting institutions and organizations. And some of the examples include the German Science and Innovation Days held as part of the annual Brisbane German Week, and most recently the Adelaide German Week. And the one in Brisbane is running since a few years and is always well attended and very successfully. There are symposia for alumni of the German Academic Exchange Service and the Humboldt Foundation. 2 days ago, there was the final in the Falling Walls Labs in Berlin, which is a global interdisciplinary pitching competition for students and early career professionals. And this year is especially exciting for me because one of my students took part there. There are research marketing events and University Gateway Open Days. There is Australian-German Research Symposia hosted by Go Australia, which is actually a German-based student advisory organization that represents Australian, New Zealand, and Asian universities in Germany. And then, of course, there are regular science circle receptions hosted by the embassies in Canberra and Berlin. So the advantages of the network are for the bilateral research collaboration, and it is a modern, efficient research marketing tool to highlight all those great initiatives that actually take place, and it's all done at a minimal cost. It's also inclusive, and it's very similar to what Catherine was saying. In the past, several smaller groups actually have existed, and now those different groups have found a new home within the network, and it's open to everyone from the scientific diaspora in both countries, as well as industry partners and other stakeholders, funding agencies, Chamber of Commerces, and cultural institutions. On a personal note, I'm not a big social media person, but in this case, I have really found a use of those media for promoting the interactions between both countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Meyer, and thank you for powering through despite having COVID. Now I'd like to invite Professor Costa to deliver some remarks. Professor?
Okay, thank you very much, Rosie. I hope you can hear me well. Hello, Rosie, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much for this kind invitation. Of course, I'm here representing much younger people, in particularly Ilaria Pagani, who is the president of the Association of Researchers of Italian origin in Australasia. But then there's a reason why I'm here. Presumably she called me because she knows that I am one of the ones that founded this association. You see, when I moved to Australia back in 1970, I realized that many scientists migrated and expatriated. And I thought that was a temporary issue, but it hasn't stopped. And in fact, I can see now there's an increased migration of scientists out of Europe, and many of them, fortunately for us in Australia, are migrating to Australia. So just to give you an idea, of course, Italian migrants are very numerous around the world. We think there are certainly about more than 4 million citizens. And if you count the second and third generation, we're talking about several millions. Now, the research scientists all around the world, and just imagine that when people calculated a few years ago, the top scientists of Italian sort of work in the world, about half of them were and still work overseas, or at least not in Italy. So the Italian scientific diaspora is very important. Not surprisingly, I was lucky to participate to a very important meeting in Rome in 2000, where together with the help of the scientific attaché, Nicola Sasanelli, we thought of organizing, first of all, something within Australia. That's how the Association of Italian Researchers in Australia started. And in a way, we have been supported all these years by the embassy, by the consuls, in particular all the ambassadors. And lately, we were lucky, in fact, and thank you, Ambassador Crudele, who came to Adelaide recently and established a good contact with the local, if you like, chapter of ARIA. And therefore, we count very much on this continuation. Now, this association is an incorporated and not-for-profit organization, and we really founded back in 2004, myself and Nicola Sasanelli, that was a scientific attaché then, and in agreement with the Italian government to bring together Italian researchers in Australia, was initially most active in South Australia. At the meeting in Rome, in Frascati, the idea was also to create a council of Italian researchers abroad, attached to an interministerial body and the foreign ministry. It succeeded partially with one government. Then the next government, as often happened around the world, decided that was not their own idea, so they canceled. It's a pity. But then we had many meetings since the year 2004 on, with the help, as I said, of the embassy and the various consulates, including a meeting of Italian scientists and Australian scientists in Melbourne back in 2004. So the area has been quite active. But then, as it happened, scientists age, like me, we tend to outlive, in a way, the functional lives of our representative, whether consul or ambassador. So we have a long life. This is something should be recognized. Scientists are dedicated for all life, and they don't change easily the activities. But in a way, every organization needs a new blood. And we were very lucky in South Australia to have such a new blood. In fact, from the beginning of 2021, the president was elected, Dr. Ilaria Pagani, a scientist herself in Adelaide, and they did extend to the entire Australasia this local chapter in South Australia. So this includes now Australia and New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. Now, the new board of ARIA is motivated as a dynamic group with a vision to create, indeed, a very strong network of Italian researchers in the field, and bridging the researchers, bridging countries, governments, and communities, all fulfilling what I heard very nicely from the various ambassadors that we heard earlier today. In a way, one of the main aims of the organization is actually to promote network. I'm reading now from what they written only a short while ago, to promote network among Italian researchers in Australia Pacific, offering programs of mentorship, webinars, conferences, fellowship, travel grants, to promote networking and bilateral collaboration between Australia Pacific and Italian research institutions and universities and other international group of researchers, and indeed to promote in general Italian culture. But here we come to something quite new in a way. At the Conference of Italian in the World in year 2000, one of the chapters, I got them here, was indeed the science, women, information, young, solidarity, culture, and economy. You notice the word there, women and young. Well, at the moment, the ARIA organization is starting to create an area women and an area young. They realize, and we all support that, they need really to extend the idea of researchers and scientists to, in a way, to fulfill the full spectrum of intelligence around the world, in particular, in Italian scientists, that should indeed include everyone, which includes, of course, not only women, but increasingly young people. Because I'm old enough to know that we need young people if we want to continue even the good ideas that some of us had a long time ago. So this, in a way, is a very innovative idea, and the aim is to promote women in research by offering a fairly tailored worksheet promoting the work of female Italian researchers, networking and empowering women, and promote a more balanced representation in every field. Now, I could read some more of this, but I want to add a little bit of my own experience. And in a way, we come from a period, we are in the middle of it, where nations are acquiring their own identity again, but not always in a very positive way. This meeting I'm participating now with you, it represents a very good move to go beyond national boundaries, not only between a country in Europe and Australia, but with many countries in Europe. I think if there was some indication, what could happen at its best? Well, there are a few things that could happen. First of all, I think the recognition that science is more needed now than ever before in all aspects of human life, starting, of course, the experience of COVID is a good example. I like to think the scientists have gained the credibility and credential that they were at risk of losing, but we are not there yet. In climate science, we still are uncertain as to whether people recognize science as an important event. I personally think that science is the most important tool that humankind has to overcome the challenges. I'd like to add, because I'm a neuroscientist, I work in brain and nervous system, I think even issues like political and social challenges need more science, not less science. So in a way, what Europe could do, and you may be the right people to begin this process, certainly ARI will be behind it as well, is to extend some of the facilities that exist already in Europe to interchange scholars like Erasmus, extend that to Australia. Create perhaps even some awards of European nature in addition to the one of a national origin. Certainly extend the schemes, facilitate mobility. This is something that our ambassador mentioned before. And I would like to add one issue often I'm asked is about the recognition of degrees. That's something that individual researchers and universities themselves cannot just do it. It has to be done at the national levels. So I'd like to leave you with the idea that certainly the research of Italian origin in Australasia are certainly behind all the good deed and good things that have been proposed. Now the task is to continue and to identify how they can be actually implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Costa, for those really rich insights. I look forward to unpicking them a little bit more in the Q&A. Now I'd like to call on Dr. Lopez Sanchez to deliver some remarks. Dr. Lopez Sanchez, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rosie, and thank you very much for inviting me to be in this webinar. I'm excited about that. I'm Ángel López Sánchez. I'm an astronomer and a research scientist at Macquarie University. And let me start acknowledging the traditional custodian of the Macquarie University land, the Walamatal clan of the Durang Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since the beginning time. We pay our respect to elders past, present, and future. And I'm actually right now the president of the SRAP, of the Spanish Researchers in Australia Pacific Association, which is an independent and not-for-profit organization without any political affiliation and created by and for researchers and science workers in all branches of science, culture, and art. Our mission is to disseminate science and facilitate collaboration to increase the impact of our research and enhance the cultural enrichment of our society. The beginning of SRAP actually was around 2013 when some few of us started to talk together, but the association was actually created in 2015. Right now we are over 200 Spanish researchers. We are working across Australia and in all the states and in territories in Australia, also in New Zealand, and in some of the South Pacific islands, including Vanuatu and Fiji. SRAP is also a founder member of Euraxess, which is the network of 19 associations of Spanish researchers working abroad. SRAP promotes and supports networking between Australian Pacific and Spanish research institutes and universities, and provides support for Spanish researchers in Australia Pacific, similarly to other associations that you have been mentioning before. And we regularly organize networking events, including what we call the research bites, some few fun ones like Pinchos de Ciencia, or events during the National Science Week. Some of them, for example, in collaboration with Instituto Cervantes, and we did some of them this year, and some other social events. We also organize visits to research facilities, for example, Sidon Spring Observatory, which is a big networking event for us because we stay there in the observatory with our some of the friends and connections with the industries and also with the diplomats. And our events are sponsored not only by the Spanish Embassy, we are very grateful, but also by the Fundación Consejo España-Australia, or Fundación Ramón Areces, Instituto Cervantes, and industries, Spanish industries working here in Australia, such as Navantia and Indra. Precisely, our most important event, it is what we call the Australian Spain Research Forum, which is a multidisciplinary conference aimed at the wider community to highlight Australian Spain research and present world research and cultural topics which are of special interest to the Australian and Spanish societies. And as I said, this research is our main networking event, putting together people from research and other disciplines in Australia and Spain between universities, research centers, industries, diplomats, and artists who have an interest in scientific research. Precisely in 2022, we are organizing the 8th of the Australian and Spain Research Forum, this year with the title of Digital World. It will be here at Macquarie University on the Friday to 25th of November, with the option of attending virtually or in person. So if you're interested, please ask. Since 2018, SRAP and the Spanish Embassy in Australia organize also the Malaspina Award. The Malaspina Award is awarded to individuals or organizations who have made a significant contribution to the scientific and cultural relationships between Spain and Australia. And this year, the 2022 Malaspina Award have been conferred to Air MIT Europe. And we are having a very special award ceremony on Friday, 18th of November at the Australian Academy of Science in Canberra next week. We also do plenty of promotion of our researchers, and particularly this year we started a new award, the Early Researchers Award, that have been sponsored by the Fundación Ramón Areces. We will present the winner of this award on the Research Forum in a couple of weeks. Also, in collaboration with Instituto Cervantes in Sydney, we created the Cátedra Cervantes, to bring relevant researchers from Spain to Australia, not only for public